Thank you all for being here. I hope you're having a good time. And just a quick note, I would just want to thank our sponsors. Thank you to Google, SmartFrame, Stock Trek Images, Image Rights, CDAS, Capture, and Peak Rights for sponsoring this conference. This is just a follow-up for our resilience panel that we had on Tuesday. And we have today Karen De Silva, Brenna Millis, and Stuart Cohen, and hopefully we'll be joined also by Robin Stewart. So this is going to be very casual. If the way it's going to work is that we will really allow everyone to participate and ask questions and create a conversation, really casual. If you want to participate, ask something, you can raise your hand there, and then we will turn off your mic, and then you'll be able to participate with us. I have one request. I've set up my screen so that I can see everybody and I can have like a warm feeling. I'm feeling cold today, but everybody has their camera off. If you feel like it, please turn on your camera so that we can see you also. We can see your expression, emotion. Yes, one is on. Hello. So that, yes, you see, that's a lot better. I feel less lonely. That's great. So I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to follow up. I think the first question that I have is to Brenda. I was really intrigued by everything you mentioned about the trends that you work with Adobe, that you create for Adobe, the visual trends that come up every year.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can tell us a little bit more about the visual trends. How do you make it work? How soon do you start working on it?
Yeah.
How big is your team, by the way?
It's
to do that,
very small. Well, it's, I work, a lot of us at Adobe Stock, we work across teams, which I love. It's getting different groups with different types of expertise. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Robin.
I would say that I start about halfway through the year. To start before that seems premature to me. And then I'd say by the end of summer, I'm deep in. I start kind of gathering ideas and gathering information. A lot of my research is around Adobe Stock data, search history, watching search history go up. I work with also Behance is part of Adobe. So we have creative projects curated specifically with Behance curators when they start to see kind of, I always say patterns emerge. So similar types of projects, they start pulling those. So, like so many of us, I'm just kind of looking for patterns. So I study a lot of different industries because all industries, use visuals to message their audience or their intended audience. And so I start to look for patterns across many industries. I work very closely on a daily basis with WGSN, which is the global forecasting company. I work with Wunderman Thompson Intelligence, Edelman. So I do have a Pantone as a partner. So I have a lot of external partners. And then I just am the master of going down rabbit holes. Full transparency, Instagram freezes my account semi-regularly because they think I'm a bot. I'm too active. TikTok, social media, a lot of reports, breaking news, fashion, art, advertising. Here's looking at you, Karen. Yeah, and so it's getting as kind of a wide of a swath as I can, casting a very wide net. And then, this is the hardest year I've ever had, because I think nobody will be surprised here when I say that the overall messaging across industries, because of that darn global health pandemic, which continues, a lot of the year was spent with brands messaging the same thing in the same ways. Now, that is no fault of anybody's. There was a lot of pivoting, a lot of concern about how brands were being perceived, a lot of caution. But so it was a very, very challenging chapter for me to start to kind of pull out different types of creative projects That said, once I finally, like any creative project, when I finally hit the tipping point and I was like, aha, then it was particularly satisfying because it was a real challenge. But yeah.
I'm curious because you have like a strong presence in, I think, in Japan, right? Adobe in general.
We do.
Did you feel, because they had COVID before us, did you feel in your trend that there was something that was going to shift?
You know, what I do, because I'm so deeply American in my aesthetics and my understanding of visuals, you know, and I know this because all of the geo leads tell me that, and then I believe them. So what I do is I get my global information, and then I go to the UK, to France, to Germany, to Japan, you know, to APAC. I present my findings and I get their feedback around what works for them, what to work on localizing. So yeah, I go to them with global ideas, and then they give me their much needed feedback on how to localize those ideas and those visuals. Yeah.
Anyone wants to jump in? I honestly,
I'll jump in. I was looking on TikTok. I'm trying to find Brenda dancing. I can't find her.
You'll find my son. You will not find me.
I think she's one of those people who spy on others.
Yeah, I'm the witness.
But I'm curious, like, because we have limited budget, we don't run trends. I mean, we look at our own data, but we really look at what you guys provide. So I'm curious to see, Karen and Robin, do you guys also look at what the stock agencies, the type of reports that they put together for future trends and to see to help your engagement with clients, for example?
So yes, so we use whatever we could get our hands on, right, to generate insights. And yet we also have relationships with different providers for this data so that we know where to go. So it's like, it's not ever one thing. It's really being able to come up with the right strategy for what we're trying to do. And we're scrappy and we do what we have to do to make it happen and have it be original and effective and unique all the time.
What about you, Karen?
So Robin and Brenda are in a slightly different position than me, right? Their job is to have as much lead time, right? So that they can then talk to the, present it to a creative team or use it in a pitch. You know, I have the advantage of not needing that much time. Like for me, the trends are important, but I have to be just before the tipping point, right? Because if I'm talking to, say, a client that is shooting travel or food, like to have something in your book that isn't quite a trend yet is not as useful as being part of a trend that feels like it's just starting to happen, right? So I have a bit of an advantage in that I don't have to be completely clairvoyant, but I just need to be able to pick up on something that feels to be like it's repeating. And then the other thing I would add is that one of the reasons, hopefully you got this message from me yesterday, but I really think that trending is a part of your dialogue. Like, so when you're marketing yourself or you're in a situation where you're talking to a client and you can use like a understanding of maybe what they're trying to accomplish because their creative teams have been in a back room with the door closed strategizing for 3 months. And instead of talking about the lens you used, you were talking about the story that you were trying to get the model to understand, that like you might come across as somebody that feels more of a partner than just a resource.
That's great.
You know, so interesting that it's kind of fascinating. So the fact that we have one foot in the production world and one foot in the stock world, historically, I've always been able to take what I was getting on agency briefs and translate it into needs downstream for the stock world. But it's funny, you know, listening to Robin and Brenda talk about it, but I think it's on its head now. And actually back in the day, like the Getty briefs nearly were driving some of the agency briefs. Like we're going way back, like to the Denise Wagner days, you know, like you could look at her briefs and I guarantee you in 3 months, we were getting boards from agencies that reflected that. Then for a while, for years, I mean, like the last 10 years, it's really been the briefs that we see coming from agencies, like with campaigns, that we would see downstream in being represented in the stock world. Now, I kind of feel there are trends that you're picking up on socially, like with Instagram, that are driving it all. So
100%. No,
yeah.
I mean, social is the driver, to be honest with you. And a lot of that has to do with youth culture and Gen Z and creativity, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the whole, what was it, 2-3 years ago, the whole follow me thing, you know, like all of a sudden I started getting all these storyboards from agencies with that. And I'm like, that's the social media thing. And it's like, man, no, it was like everybody wanted to be like social media. So
the thing, Stuart, was that the hand?
Yeah, the hand.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I got tired of it.
Oh my God. And try going to shoot it. If for some, and here's the other thing is we had whole jobs that we had to go, like travel jobs, and shoot it like that. And you realize it's a lot easier to shoot on a phone than it is to shoot it for real life, you know?
Yeah.
And then when you got 20 people looking over a screen trying to, you know, perfect it. But yeah, some of the trends, and one of the things I see are some of these, and this actually could even speak to Adobe a bit. Like some of these apps that are allowing all this crazy stuff to happen, you know, on social, are really pretty amazing. Now, when that goes to translate into the real production world, some of the apps are just that. They're apps that are really working on mobile, but will not really translate to the large screen. So they're starting, you know, and I know eventually they all will, but so that's kind of interesting. Like just say, for instance, the changing the skies, you know, that came out in Photoshop. I mean, it works small, but from what I understand, big, it's still not quite there. So, but that's the buzz though. Everyone's like, oh my God, you know, how much do I pay to replace skies in my life, you know? So anyway, it's, I think, you know, what's wagging the tail is it continually changes. And I think it's changing faster and faster and faster.
There's a question.
Sorry.
There's a question from Leslie. Leslie, do you mind asking it?
Okay, so my question is, it's something I always struggle with, is I really like trends and looking at trends, but trends kind of speak to what's happening now and what's been happening. So my curiosity is, what do you do? And Brenda, I know you've answered one question, which you can't share everything that you all do, I know, but give us a sense of how you look forward and try to take the trends from today and anticipate them.
Yeah, no, I actually have a problem that probably seems counterintuitive. I have to be careful not to release my trends too early, because I'm looking at a lot of creative projects that haven't yet reached mainstream commercial appeal. So I have to be careful, honestly, to make sure that a global enterprise client would be would have an interest in showing this kind of theme, technique, aesthetic, topic that would find a larger audience. So I have, in some years past, kind of scooped myself and pushed something out too early, you know, a year or two before it hit mainstream appeal. So my experience is not at all, it's actually the opposite. It's not that it's hard to see what's about to happen. It's like, I have to make sure not to release it too early. So, you know, something may be trending, but to whom, to which audience? So with Adobe Stock, having global clients and working with global contributors, my job really is to help release something that I know will be growing throughout the next year, but already has hit a tipping point where it has enough commercial appeal to resonate. if that makes sense.
You're saying you're looking maybe in smaller buckets and seeing things that you think then will translate into a.
And I know they will. And I know they will. I can just see the way they're building, and I know they will. But a major corporate client might not be interested yet. I know they might in a year or two. Yeah. So to me, that's the balancing act I have to do. Personally, I love the edgy stuff. So I have to constantly hold myself back and just like, not yet, not yet, not yet, So it's a good problem to have. But I see the numbers, I see the projects, and I see it building from niche eclecticism, edgy. Isn't that edgy? Isn't that cool? To this is now, you can open the floodgates now. And in fact, it'll only be bigger by the end of the year. For one great example, I mean, the visual trends for 2020 were so scarily popular because of COVID. Yeah, I did not foresee COVID. And one of them is called Express Yourself, which is about the importance of visuals where any range of emotions is conveyed in that image so that you connect to the viewer. You're showing your vulnerability. You're expressing the fact that all humans experience all emotions and that it's okay. There's no shame. There's actually strength in honesty. There's strength in every emotion. And that's what we all need more right now. And that's, something I was pitching last July, because I saw it building on social, and that was a Gen Z thing, like Gen Z being so sick of the perfection of the, carefully curated personas in these visuals, on these platforms. TikTok was a big part of that. Don't be afraid to show how you feel. Don't be afraid to show your imperfection. In fact, viewers want that, to connect. And then look where we are now. Yeah.
There's also, Tom has a question on editorial trends. Tom, would you like to turn on your camera and join us in the conversation?
Hi, thank you so much, everybody. I'm just wondering, are you looking at the editorial space in addition to creative? I mean, most of these seem more like creative briefs or creative trends, but are you looking at editorial calendars or anniversaries or any other kinds of things for everybody? Brenda, but for everybody, things that might drive archival needs so that archival contributors can start to pull things from their archives, or that might drive, news coverage and that kind of thing.
Tom, are you talking about like a calendar? Because there's a lot of really great calendars, especially tied to Instagram or, social, where they will give you a heads up on like any event or anniversary or theme or something to remember in history. Those sort of resources are great, especially if your stream, is to remind people that we've got everything right from under the sun, so that you can react quickly to all that. I mean, I've even gotten them as handouts from like a marketing conference. Like they give you like a calendar and they basically have something on every single day, but they're really helpful for sure. Instead of, imagine the time you would have to spend you'd have to have like an intern on it every day, trying to figure out what your week will look like next week.
Actually, which are there resources that you use, like specific things that people could find online?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the name is because I always use the ones that I get for free, but I know that there are ones online where it just tells you every day what every day of the month, what the day is or what in history has happened. I don't know. Does anybody else know a specific company that does it?
No, but I think, we have a big, at Superstock, we have a big archival collection, which I love. But that was actually part of the reason that sucked me into Superstock, because I like the vintage collection. And I find that it's underused, and there are so many different uses. A lot of the people on this page have vintage collections, and there's so many uses that you could find for some of this archival content, but a lot of times people don't spend the time looking at it. But there's such a treasure trove of vintage stuff out there that really can translate to any campaign, whether it's a current day campaign or whether it's a day of the week or whatever. So we've had some success, believe it or not, in the UK with some big brands just using our archival stuff for their campaigns. And I just think that it's out there, and somehow you got to bring it to the front, you know, of whatever you're trying to sell, Thomas, you know, for people to see it. So much of it is really just visibility. How do you do it? So.
Great, thank you.
We also have a question from Heather. Heather, would you like to?
Yes. So Stuart, what Stuart said about archive, by the way, I do a ton of customer trainings, and I always am giving a shout out to the archive, especially Fortune 500 companies that are like heritage companies, where in our archives we actually have content referencing their business that they could be using in all different ways. And they're like, I could have had a V8. Why didn't I call you sooner? I'm like, but Stuart, my question for you, I was thinking about what you had to say in your talk earlier about sort of that metamorphosis and how you were thinking about retooling the business and what are some smart ways to move forward in a very thoughtful way. One thing I know everybody wants more of is video. You know, video is in very high demand, and you are masterful. I know from personal experience how masterful you are at shooting both stills and video at the same time to kind of double your content for your budget. What advice would you have to the stills folks that might be listening right now about how to sort of tiptoe into video or go all in and shoot video? What advice would you give?
That's always a tough one, because I came from both worlds and I love doing it. And I find today, especially in the commercial realm, and in the stock realm, like when we were building the collection at Blend, the still people all thought they needed to shoot video. And honestly, for the first couple of years, most of it really would not cut the mustard in any kind of a professional application, which was a challenge because you wanted to be supportive and inspire everyone to start to do that. And but over time, I think it's gotten better and better. One thing, I know a lot of people have talked about partnering with another person, and sometimes that's a solid way to have, a camera op as well as a still person, and you could get more yield. A lot of times these days we're shooting with multiple live action cameras, and we usually have a still camera. I found, this is truly what I found though, I found that it's harder to get great stills than it is to get good video, because the video, you pan across it and it's like, okay, it's a clip, it'll work. But a still is still a still. And for a great still, I found that if that's really where one's talent lies, it's a gift, and not everybody has that. And just because you know how to use a red camera or something does not make you a great still photographer. So, there's a reason that they were different mediums. I mean, there are different careers up until a few years ago. Now everybody thinks they have to do both. So, I mean, I think to cut to the chase, Heather, about the best way to approach it is you have to love it. You have to understand your gear and be comfortable with your gear, and just be okay throwing the cameras around and just trying different things. And also using other people. Like if you're a still guy and you want to do live action stuff as well, I mean, a big recommendation I've always had is, find a great user operator, owner operator of a live action camera, and use them also, for a couple jobs. And then you see how they're doing it. And, so it's just one of those, it's the 10,000 hour thing. And I truly believe it comes down to that. You got to do it every day, and then you'll be good.
Also, I'm going to tell Denise Wagner you were talking about her, and she will be thrilled. She's at HBO in Seattle.
Yeah. Okay, please do.
And hi to Karen. I love this Getty vibe. And also Leslie, Michael Teaster told me you're responsible for him, and I love you for that. So thank you.
He's always very kind about that. I do have a follow-up question, though. In a way, it's based on what Stuart was just saying and Tom's question. And it kind of goes back 2 decades ago now, when I started with Corbis. And it goes to the resilience topic. I think if the conversation is about resilience, part of this is about adapting to change and to understanding what's going on. but it's also how can you take what you have now and make it more valuable. And when Tom asked his question, it was interesting because when I started with Corbis, I came out of a creative side of the business. And at the time, Corbis pretty much had Bettman Archive. That was, all historical UPI. Great content, by the way. And Stuart, your comment really hit home for me because the challenge I was given was to start building the market from advertising and that side of the business. And so what we did is we kind of mined the archival collections for content that we could promote into advertising while we then tried to build relationships and get content in on the commercial side. And we found this kitschy collection called Jean Dro, black and white, really great content, all model released, I think from the 50s mainly. And we were able to promote that kind of like, I can't remember who was saying it, where we could go to clients or I think it was what Heather was saying about heritage and sort of that. And I can't remember who the campaign was, but there was this black and white buggy with the baby's feet sticking out the end. And it was one that was used in a great campaign. This is a long time ago. But anyway, I guess my question is, are there things that you all do to try and adapt and be, this is a really tough time for everyone, right? And so I'm curious what people are doing to help bridge the gap. And if there are ideas that you can provide this group about resilience and kind of how you measure where we are today with where we're going to be tomorrow, if that makes sense.
And can I say something quickly just on that, Leslie? One of the things early on at Superstock a couple of years ago that I engaged Karen, one of the first projects we worked on, was to do a zine with our vintage content. And we hired a designer and they basically did some composites with some of the vintage stuff. And to this day, I still think it was brilliant. So I think, this content, you're gonna see a lot more compositing going on, I think, going forward. And there's so many great ideas. If you look at just, surrealistic, art, you look at Asia's been doing it for years. It's all these, combos or, like put together stuff that looks amazing. And so that's one thing. The other thing, and I'm going to say about the video, back to what we were talking about, and I don't know, something you said made me think about it. Somehow for licensing, downstream licensing, like what we all do with stock, in order to have great content, someone's going to have to hold the line on price, because it's really hard. And I love it, and I do it for nothing, right? But to get super grade A content into our collections, you have to be able to pay your contributor something. And I think it's the trend is to the point where, the trend's the trend. It's going down, and they're going to get what they're going to get. But the truth is, if you're looking to get the kind of content, say, that we were all feeding, the Gettys of the world back 15 years ago, you're not going to get that caliber of people that are willing to license their pictures for 54 cents. So I don't know, in video, it's the same. You're doing 8K files and just our hard drive space, So I think I know that might be a little off topic, but it's not really, because when you talk about resilience, you talk about how are we going to be here tomorrow and how are we going to lead the way. And of course, we all have the love for it, but somehow we have to lead the way in being able to monetize it somehow. And to monetize it, I think we have to be unique. So that's where we have to go.
Yeah.
Could I jump in just because I think that's such an excellent point, but I want to point out something about maybe 10 years ago, everybody thought publishing was dead. Publishing was dead. There were reports, companies were going out of business. And about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there's a research group called Forrester. They did maybe it was a little longer. I'm not sure if my years are right, but you'll get the idea. A few years back, Forrester came out and said publishing is getting set to fly. It's going to be a really important space, because all of a sudden those publishers that were struggling so hard with going from analog to digital and figuring out how they got people to pay to actually read their stuff, all of a sudden they were starting to figure it out. And they were starting to figure out how, whether it was OTT and streaming kind of services or whether it's magazine services and so forth, they were starting to figure out the sort of subscription model and all of that. And I just think it's an interesting story for this one about the low price of images, because there's lots of information out there about, we all know we've been at the rate, the race to the bottom analogy and so forth. But I think you're exactly right, Stuart. First of all, to get the good content, we're going to have to make sure that the artists are compensated. But also, I think what you're going to see is this polarization between content that warrants being paid for, if you will. Not that any content really shouldn't warrant, but there may be other drivers for it. We were having a conversation the other day about free, for example, and Adobe is compensating their artists now as they go make the decision to go into free, which I thought was really interesting. I haven't heard anyone else say that. But anyway, my point is, I think your points are really good one, Stuart, in that, first of all, I don't think the price to the bottom will survive because nobody would be in the business. So we're going to have to figure out and adapt how we shift our models so that we can not only get compensated, but that people are getting what they want, and the photographers or the creators or videographers are able to afford to be able to go out and shoot really great content. I don't have the answers, but I think.
But let's look at music just for a sec. And somehow, I mean, now granted, the music industry has totally changed, but everyone thought artists were not going to be able to make any money. Now, I know it's not what it was, and it's still different, dealing with the number of downloads on or plays streaming on Spotify and stuff like that. But yet there are more bands around than ever. So, who knows what, maybe the music has totally recovered. From what I understand, the industry as a whole is doing well. But, I don't know how that translates, but there are plenty of bands out there.
Well, and it's shifted. They make their money typically, this year is going to be weird, but they typically make their money by their concerts and their big events, right? And the online is a whole different thing. So again, it's another great example of how an industry shifted to try and adapt and survive. And the interesting thing too is I don't think people realize, was it 2000 and it was like 2000 or 2003 that Apple Music, that iTunes came out or something. It was, I don't know, I probably have that wrong too. Don't ever hold me to timetables.
It's like 2005, I think.
Yeah, but Apple, this wasn't that long ago. Maybe it's because I'm older, but anyway.
But if you think of that actually, and you go back, and sorry, don't want to dominate this, but I'll just leave you with this. So if you think about music, because the music, the artists were making it less on royalties and more on, merch at their concerts and on being on the road. And then you think about photographers, and for us, it was actually the same thing if you think about it, because we had assignments, but yet we were making relatively great money, in royalties through licensing. So it swung back to really having to be out there shooting, like jobs, to get paid, just like, musicians had to be playing gigs, to get paid, as opposed to just all licensing rights. So, there are a lot of parallels.
Great. So I wanted to, on Tuesday, we talked also about engagement, civil engagement, and I wanted to hear from Robin about Titanium. What made you start Titanium, and where do you see it going, and did it work for you? Is it working well for you in the stock industry? A lot of us are not on our own, like Pisha, for example, Pisha Stock. I have some of my collection with Adobe, some with Getty. So there's a lot of minuscule groups that are always working together. Can you tell us a little bit more about Titanium?
Yep. So Titanium was really born out of the need for the other services beyond what the Mix did, right? So the Mix specializes in strategy and creative, right? It's like what we do. And then over the course of these 10 years, the need for PR, the need for digital, the need for experiential and communications and SEO, and all of a sudden, it was like pinnacle moment around either scaling up the business for what it is, right? Hiring all these other people to do these other things, or come up with an innovative way to grow and stay relevant. And so I really had no interest. I mean, I already have 25 people, which is a lot of responsibility between, you know, who they are and the benefits and everything that goes around having a staff. You have no idea. But then, like, I'm not done. So I had to come up with a way. And so I thought, well, if I could actually connect with like-minded entrepreneurs that were looking for growth, that like to collaborate, like in how they do what they do, is it possible that we could like come together and become something scalable and bigger? I mean, it was really like, as an entrepreneur, we make things up all the time, and some of them work and some of them don't. But in this case, I met with literally, and this is like cold calling, like CEOs of companies, to like looking online, looking like geographically across the US to find companies that were, one, independent, certified minority owned, right? So that they were a diverse supplier, a certified with a certificate, and that they would be willing to collaborate like intra-agency and not have it be their way or my way. And so I met with 152 agencies, like on my own time and my own dime, to find the initial group of agencies that we came to market with 6 years ago. It took 3 years of getting in the air, seeing their company, their culture, understanding what their client, right? Because this is what people are buying. People are buying, they, first of all, they want something else, right? They don't want a holding company where people are coming into the room, they don't even know each other. They're saying, oh, you're from this company. Oh, I'm from this company. Oh, hi. You know, I guess we're on this pitch together. Like, we're not like that. We are relate. We're like Sunday dinner, right? We're like coming to the room. We do calls every other week, all agency. And so we've created a culture that becomes infectious, that clients want to emulate for themselves inside of how they're working. And then we truly become like an extension of their team. But it was not easy to find independent, like-minded entrepreneurs that were looking for this. And I would say the past 6 years, every year has been better. It's different, right? Because in 2 years, it's different. This year, it's different. And now, inside this like awoke moment, you know, I would say, hold on tight, because we are killing it and we are slammed. So I'm a business owner, so I care about, you know, seizing the moment. I'm like, oh my God, is this it? Is this is what I've been waiting for, my 30-year runway, like this moment right now? And what do I know? Maybe it is, maybe it's not sure. But I would say brands are open and more receptive than ever to take meetings. They're reaching out to us and we're holding them accountable to what their commitments are around working with diverse companies, around saying they're gonna support Black Lives Matter. And like, we want to, and we're asking, like in our RFP responses or on the Q&A calls, well, we saw when back in April, when the whole Black Lives Matter the initiative happened, like what are you guys still doing in support of that time period? Because I recall that you made a declaration that said you were going to spend $200 million. And we're just curious, because we want to work for companies that honor their agreements and are like, have integrity about what they're saying, not just checking a box and saying it because in the moment it was the thing to do. And I would say some of the people are doing it, and a lot of them are not.
That's
and
true.
We are walking away from those opportunities, right? Because in this day and age, it's too important to us as a business and a brand that we work with people that operate with integrity and do what they say they're going to do. And it matters to us.
Oh, well done. I'm so happy for you. That's really good. That's amazing.
Yeah, I have to say it's so much that but it is a lot, but it's so fulfilling. Like, even though every day I just never know what's coming at me. And then people like that may know me are like, oh my God, you're that girl that's doing that big thing in the D&I space. And I'm like, well, really, we're not in the D&I space. We are the D&I space. So there's always like that point of distinction that has to get made, because people like still need to be educated on what it means to work with diverse suppliers, right? It's like, there is no more general market, people. Like, we are that. And so it's kind of like we're in this cycle of almost starting over again, and like educating people from the ground up. I mean, it's almost like when we were all learning about the millennial audience, and everybody was taking all their money and like saying, we want to invest in them. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Like, what is wrong with you? You don't even know who those people are yet. And like, they're just taking their dollars and putting it there. And for some it worked, and for a lot it didn't. But in this day and age, this diversity inclusion thing is not going anywhere. It is here to stay. And people like me are going to hold it in check and go forward.
That's
well,
great.
I think, Robin, that a lot of what you're saying is what we've been hoping for, which is that brands finally understand that they need to represent the customers they want to attract. If you're not representing me, I am not buying your stuff. So
and I would say, for all you people that are in this category of stock and content, we are desperate for better content around these diverse audiences. So get with the program, people, because we are killing ourselves not able to find the imagery that we need.
Yes.
Across every moment, every industry, every lived experience. Yeah.
Yep.
We've been hearing, we do this survey every year of the industry, and we've been hearing, I think it's every year that we've done the survey, and this will be our 8th, that diversity is needed, better diversity is needed. That, don't make it look like you took one Black man, one white woman, et cetera, up, but make it real life environments. It's a cry. But I do have one question, kind of selfish. I have a young company, and I've been looking into getting it certified as a woman-owned entity. Yes, it's a lot more tedious than I think people realize. This isn't about, showing you own the company or whatnot. Anyway, my point was, I've also started looking on the about pages of companies to see who's involved with the company. Shockingly, many, nothing against white men, but, they show all these white men, but shockingly, some companies have stopped putting their officers and people on their website. And I'm just curious your thoughts about that, because as I've started looking and become more aware of this, I'm wondering if it's a way to hide the fact that maybe they aren't there yet, but companies that are even saying that they believe in diversity and they want to get more diversity in their boards or whatnot, and yet it's hard to find. I'm just curious your thoughts.
It is very difficult. I know for my own self around our own hiring practices. It's not like I could post a job saying searching for African-American, Hispanic women. No, but like really, like it's almost like we need like the behind the curtain way to interview people, because before you even take the meeting, you've already looked on LinkedIn, or you've looked on some social platform or Google in general, and you don't, I mean, I got to tell you, it's like neat. What is it? Like straws and like the hay, right? It's like they're hard, good people in general are hard to find, let alone diverse talent is hard to find, and especially in marketing. So I would say there are a small percentage of brands that are crushing it, like that they've gone public to Wall Street and said, this is one of our 4 commitments between now and 2025 to have this percentage of our workforce be this percentage of our board be that, and we are going to achieve the $1 billion roundtable by working with diversifiers. Very few, but those that have made the stake in the ground have people's attention, like mine. Like, I want to work for a company like that sees us for who we are and not for what we're not, right? So it becomes like not wanting to work with small agencies or give back and support small businesses, but look at it from the place that this collective of agencies are all minority owned and operated, and what their business strategy is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, I just think at the end of the day, it's where the future is going and where we are right now. And I do think that brands are hiding behind the curtain.
Yes, they are. But it's great to hear all of that. And I just want to shout out right here in this roundtable, we have Blend, they specialize in diversity. We have Mocha Stock also, and there's Picture Stock. And I'm sorry if I've forgotten someone. You can just post a message and then
and reach out to me.
Yes, we will. Anybody else has a comment or want to add something or have a questions about something that was said on Tuesday?
Well, I would say one more thing about what we were just talking about. I think it's interesting because I've worked with a lot of companies as clients, and while we aren't always addressing this kind of a topic, one of the things that oftentimes comes up is the need to have their company reflect the world. And if their company doesn't reflect the world, and it may be the world defined as who they are targeting and their universe, if you will, as opposed to you can't be all things to all people kind of thing. But if you don't have the perspectives and the insight to reflect the audiences that you're going after, I think that's a real problem. So I hope that this movement is going to add into the coming of age, that we really do have to reflect the world, which is a more diverse place than certainly corporate America is. So anyway.
Amen. And Leslie, by the way, get certified. Don't let the paperwork and the bureaucracy stop you, because once it's done, it's done. And then it's just maintaining it year over year. And once it's done, it's done.
Yeah, I'm going to, because I think it's just, we're really small and young company, and it's taking time, but I'll get there.
You know, I just going to jump in. If you think about what we talked about the other day, about how stylistically what we're seeing, and all of a sudden, if it's too polished, it doesn't look real because it's not user generated, which is everything that's been happening during COVID. I mean, I think diversity is kind of creeping in. I know it really feels slow, Robin, but like I was, with Blend at the beginning, what Valerie is now managing and championing, and it was a challenge to even find content like that, and that was 15 years ago. But I think today, if you think about overall collections, especially when you get into the user generated stuff, it's just what people have. So instead of looking for these perfect family, it's like, well, this is my family and this is what it's got to be. So I don't know if it may be a turning point, it might be opening the door to people just organically learning,
shooting their own community. Yeah,
exactly.
Shooting their own community. Yeah. A wider range of creatives that are able to sell, license their content, that show their own lives, their own perspective. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I was going to jump in and say, yeah, we've seen a trend, for a long time, and certainly accelerating in the last year, towards more need for diversity in archival content too. And up until probably a decade ago, there really wasn't a lot of representation in archival content, because the archives that got scanned and digitized and processed were primarily large, papers, mainstream news that didn't cover minority communities. So we've seen a big trend in that direction. And we started working with the Afro-American newspapers about a decade ago. And at the time, it was one of the only really good collections that was out there. And there's been a lot more move towards that. But we've also seen, we have probably it's a small collection that's online. It's a big collection overall. It's about 1.5 million assets that we represent. It's about 10,000, 11,000 that are fully digitized and researched and online. But we've seen a ton more research requests for people wanting to pull content from the offline archive. We've seen a ton more sales. I can't share specifics there, but sales have increased. And even though the collection's been online for a decade, and there's not a lot of new content being added, but there's much more demand objectively for it. And we've seen new uses for it. So we've seen a lot more requests for commercial licensing for use in advertising. And in particular, we've seen a lot more commercial requests for editorial archival content being cleared for political advertising. So I think there's a shift we're seeing in the archives, and there's also been a huge push towards more diverse content from different groups, beyond that too. So looking back at LGBTQ content from the 80s and 90s, it's very hard to source content because you didn't see as many archives where that content was being identified in the metadata in that way at the time, versus with the Afro content, they're very clear about that this is representing African American communities. So it's very easy for people now to go back and research and annotate. So I think those are the challenges we see with diversity going forward. There's a huge demand for it, but sometimes even just identifying the content, especially if it's a group where there wasn't as much identification of that content as in that way at the time, it's harder to go back and do that now.
I think too, like you can't take it for granted that your agencies know you exist, right? You have to let the creatives know that you have this, right? Because they go to their default mechanisms, and then they rather bitch and complain about what somebody doesn't have, instead of sometimes doing the extra look around who may. And then it's a quality thing, and then we don't have an account, and then like all that. So I think there's an opportunity for everybody to kind of reconnect with the creatives of the world and make yourselves better known.
Yeah, I'll share the link to the collection here because I know there's a lot of people who are in that space. But yeah, I think we find especially in the beginning, it was very important to go out and highlight content, because a lot of it is stuff that nobody had access to for 50, 60 years. It sat in a literally a dusty shelf, and then it wasn't until the scanning efforts around 2010 that got a lot of this content available. Mm-hmm. So people don't even, I think, sometimes know what to ask for or what the possibilities are. Yep. And so for example, we have great content there on voting, and it's some really interesting kind of quirky stuff that was shot in the 50s and 60s, and I think it was meant to be that way at the time, but we're seeing it resonate now in a new way with the election coming up, and uses that we never had there before. So it's good to see. It's a good shift, but it's happened, I think, increasingly, I'd say, over the last 2-3 years, and certainly in the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Tom. We have about 5 minutes. Brenda, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I just think I think historically, my big start, all my education was art history. I planned on being an art history professor, so archival is kind of my heart, to be honest. But I think with anything historical, particularly in the US, you have to show people that exists for them to know what to ask for. You have to show them this was made. I have this to offer you. Then they'll get excited. It's a challenge, but it really is to go back and say, no, there are diverse historic records. People would be so excited, I would think. But again, I just told you about my background to let you know that I get excited very quickly to hear that. Yeah.
And then Tuesday, Stuart, you mentioned how the industry has went through, you know, ups and downs, ups and downs. You know, we almost at the end of the year. So do you guys have any words for next year? Any challenge that you guys are foreseeing? How to address it? any advice to all of us?
Look into my crystal ball. Tell me what you see.
I just really think I think having gone back and reassessed all of our paths forward, I think just really believing in who you are and pushing that forward is what's going to be successful. And it goes back to, having more channels. It's not just you have to be X or Y. I mean, it goes back to the diversity. Everyone's going to have their own way, and certain ways are going to work better than others. But I mean, it's the long tail. I mean, you're going to be able to find whatever you want out there in the world. And I think it's up to us to really, partially like never stop learning, because there's so many new ways to get our messages out there and to play with them. And I think that's what's going to really be the defining factor on who is really a player going forward and who is not.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. There's a few more panels, roundtable today that you can log into. Thank you so much for joining us. Tomorrow is the last day of the conference. Well done. I love it. It was good so far. Our first digital conference at DMLA. So that was really amazing. And I really love this discussion. So I hope you all stay connected. LinkedIn is here to help. So talk to you soon. Thank you, guys.
Bye.